And here's the thing about Walt Disney, though. He doesn't give up. He's sustained by a vision, an artistic vision of the beauty that can arise out of animation. Right? He really believes in this stuff. So together with Ub Iwerks, he develops a new character to replace Oswald. He develops Mickey Mouse, or they develop, I should say, Mickey Mouse. And you can see there is Ub Iwerks' name there. He actually gave him credit, which is good. And what's key about this was Walt Disney believed that technological innovation was key to making good animation, to achieving this artistic vision. And so he's going to have he's going to have Mickey Mouse, this is Steamboat Willie, made with sound. And this is one you're definitely going to watch because this is the first, in a sense, synchronous sound cartoon where it has its own soundtrack that goes along with it. It's not people like making instruments or voicing the characters that goes on. It's an actual recording synchronized with the animation. This was actually the third Mickey Mouse cartoon made. The first two didn't sell. Initially, no one was too interested in them. But once he added the sound, then people became interested in it, right? It really gave Mickey Mouse kind of his own distinct personality that separated him from other cartoon characters. So in a sense, through technology, harnessed to an artistic vision, Walt Disney is going to recover. And it is this harnessing of technology in the service of an artistic vision that gives Disney a lot of success. So very soon they're going to go from Steamboat Willie, which used very simple sound effects, very simple music, with actions that are kind of choreographed connected to the music, to Skeleton Dance, considered a classic in animation, just 1 year later, in which the whole cartoon, known as a silly symphony, it's part of a series, is all choreographed very well with music. And it's an astounding feat when you compare these two cartoons. Having successfully brought in sound, Walt Disney is going to turn to color. He will obtain a exclusive license to use Technicolor in animation. And in 1932, will create Flowers and Trees, which takes the beautiful choreography of Skeleton Dance, adds color to it, and makes it even better, and actually has a plot. So you can see Disney over time, right? He doesn't stay in the same rut. He doesn't stagnate. He's always trying to think, how can I make cartoons better? And it's really astounding, right, how quickly he's able to adopt this technology in the service of art. But of course, art costs money. And so while the Three Little Pigs will, in some ways, be an improvement on Flowers and Trees, it has an even deeper plot in many ways. You had this fascinating kind of phenomenon where you have these three characters who look very similar, but who are animated in very different ways. The three pigs, because they have different personalities. It's an improvement, technologically speaking, in some ways over Flowers and Trees. But it also shows this desire to use the characters, the art, to make money to further the progress of art. And that's why I chose this image in particular. This is a licensed product, right? These are like cardboard cutouts you could buy related to the cartoon. Hey, you saw the cartoon? This great Silly Symphony cartoon that was so hilarious? Kids, you can buy it and you can recreate it in your own house. And we can use the money we make from that to make even better cartoons, to invest in the technology necessary to do that. And one technological masterpiece of animation could be seen in The Old Mill, produced in 1937. Now, there's a separate video you're going to watch about the technology, but it was made using this thing called a multiplanar camera that created 3D effects, basically, that made it so that cartoons looked three-dimensional, because in a sense they became three-dimensional. And you'll see it when you watch that video. It's better to watch it than to have me try and explain it. But the key thing here is that Disney's really understanding this kind of connection between business, art, and technology. And I want to stress this camera that they used to make this film cost, I believe, about $70,000, which is a huge amount of money. But Disney was willing to invest it and had the money to invest because of his artistic success. One thing about history is we try and emphasize is that typically there are multiple causes for why something happened. It's not just one thing. And so sometimes, especially this occurred among Walt Disney's competitors, there was this idea that there was some magic thing that Walt Disney was doing that made his studio so successful, that allowed him to create such wonderful cartoons. And if they could just figure out what that was, they could be just as good as Disney. And it's easy to think that that may have been technology, right? It's easy for people to say, well, if we just do color cartoons, we'll be just as good. And it was more than just the tech that made Disney so great and that made them make such great cartoons. One thing is that they got really into the characters. They realized that in order for cartoons to be successful, they needed good characters, and those characters need to have some depth, and the characters need to be consistent. So they would do things like this. This is a outline to guide artists over and animators for how to draw Goofy and how he should behave and how he should act. And they also had written notes that explained very clearly the way that Goofy should act. So it wasn't just making him consistent in terms of art, but also making him consistent in terms of his behavior. And you can see they put a lot of love into this. They were very serious about this kind of consistency. And to also give you a sense of what this allowed them to do, remember how I kind of talked about one problem is characters can get boring after a while. So one thing they realized was they had Mickey, and then they added characters to Mickey, and they figured out great ways to have them interact. And they would often have in a single cartoon, they would have Mickey Mouse, Goofy, and Daffy Duck. And the characters are so different in how they approach things, and each one of them is kind of funny on their own, but when you put them together, you have this wonderful synergy. So this emphasis on characterization, which has not all that much to do with technology. I mean, you have to be able to make, decent looking cartoons to let the character show their character. But the fact is, a lot of this was not based on technology. It was just the love that was and effort that was poured into making these characters, and the organization that made them consistent, to allow people to understand them and then how they could work together in a film. And just to give you another example, here is the Donald Duck as he would first appear in The Wise Little Hen. And you can see here that they have taken a lot of effort to develop Donald's character, to show how he would react, what his emotions would be in this cartoon. And this helped to make him a really, really strong character, along, of course, with his very distinctive voice. Another aspect of this was the storyboard. You can see how in the older cartoons, sometimes they just don't quite make sense. It's just like a bunch of gags very loosely connected with each other. And sometimes there's just plot points that don't make sense. A way to improve that was, instead of just sitting down and start animating something, was to actually have a story. And what would happen is they would draw out key frames that really showed what was kind of going on here, right? We don't need anyone to explain to us the gag that's happening here. The joke is simply that this water is spurting out of a water fountain, and Donald is trying to figure out how to catch it, and of course it's always moving around. And you can tell from this, okay, this is the gag, this is the joke. And they would have fairly complex storyboards, and then they would meet together and go over the storyboards to see, well, this story work. And Walt Disney was really good after a while of being able to tell, just by looking at the storyboard, oh, there's a problem here. There's not enough, there's too much space between the jokes, or we're hitting them too quickly with the jokes. We need more time for setup. And so they were able to get a sense of what the cartoon would be like and what needed to be done before they started really animating it. Well, that's a big strength, right? You don't have to put all this work into something until you're sure it's going to be right. So this kind of forethought, this kind of organization was key to helping Disney and his studio to put out high quality cartoons. And storyboards could also give you an idea of the characters and the action and other things that are going to appear in the cartoon and help you develop your ideas. And here you can see a close-up example where poor Donald Duck is being treated very terribly by office supplies. And here we can see Donald Duck showing what he thinks of being treated so badly. It wasn't then just technology that helped make Walt Disney cartoons so powerful and so attractive and so popular. Another important aspect was the characterization and the way that stories were developed and the consistency that was existed among the artists, the animators, all the people who created the Disney characters and the stories. But that's only one part. Another important aspect we have to emphasize is the issue of money. Walt Disney himself was not a particularly good businessman. He relied on his older brother, Roy Disney, to help keep the books, to help make sure that they could get funding. Roy had a very difficult life, I think, because of this in many respects, because Walt Disney was this artistic visionary who wanted everything to be perfect, and Roy was the money guy who was always worried about the bottom line. But they were able to work together, in part, I think, because they were so close as siblings, that they were able to get the money to make these technological innovations and to do everything they could to support the artists and the animators to become truly skilled at their craft. But again, we have to emphasize that without Roy, none of this happens, right? He's key. And what we also have to understand, there were people who thought, as I mentioned previously, that Walt Disney just had one magic trick and that's what made his cartoons so good. And it wasn't that. Just to give you an example, there was an animator who moved to Disney from another studio, and at Disney he learned about storyboards and he thought, aha, that's what gives them the magic. It's not simply that. You may have heard of the term, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. What made, in part, Disney Studios so powerful was that they were able to bring together all these different things. How to use technology properly, how to develop characters properly, while also having the business sense to keep everything going. And at the center of it, you had Walt Disney, this man who, despite his flaws, was able to energize people, to get them to work hard, to continuously develop their craft. And he did inspire a lot of love, because people saw that, you're an artist who wants to make a career in animation. You want people to take you seriously. He took you seriously and tried to help you develop in your craft. So he was able to bring together all these talented people, get them to work together well to follow a vision of beauty. And like I said, if you take any of these pieces away, the whole thing falls apart, right? Without Roy, it doesn't work. Without the technology, it doesn't work. Without the storyboard and other things, it's not going to work. But they hit this magic formula, not just one thing, but they were able to bring all these things together, and that brought them success. But as I just said, money is an issue. And we've gone over those technological developments, and there's a problem. By 1931, the cost of the shorts, those short 6, 7 minute, 8 minute, 9 minute cartoons we've been looking at, had gone from costing $5,400 to make to $13,500. The Oswald cartoons and the Alice cartoons only cost about a couple $1,000s. So the costs are skyrocketing. Silly Symphony's cartoons, right, such as the Three Little Pigs, those could cost between $60,000 and $100,000 to make. Now here's the thing. People generally did not go to the movie theater to see a cartoon. Kids maybe did. They went there to see the main attraction. The cartoons were included to help attract people, to keep the kids entertained and things like that. But the key thing was the big moneymaker was not cartoons. The big moneymaker was the feature film. So theaters are not going to pay enough money to make cartoons costing $60,000 to $100,000 really that profitable, no matter how good it was. So this is kind of another dead end that Disney has run into. Right? The problem is he does have an artistic vision. He's primarily an art person. He's primarily a creative person. The money exists not for itself so much, but because it allows him to fulfill this artistic vision of beauty. And now he's run into a money problem. Right? He can't continue to make these really expensive cartoons, as beautiful as they are, because it's not profitable. So what's he going to do? How's he going to continue to innovate? How's he going to be able to figure out a way to make things profitable, to make these wonderful cartoons? And his answer is brilliantly simple. Why not make a feature film cartoon? Right? If the money is in making feature films, and that's what brings in the audience, and we're limited by that fact because there's only so much people are going to pay for a cartoon because, as great as a cartoon is, it's not necessarily going to bring in that many more people. Well, let's make the cartoon the feature film. Then we can spend a huge amount of money on making that cartoon we'll make this wonderful artistic piece. We'll be back in business. We'll be making lots of money, which will help us to continue fulfilling this artistic vision. And it's going to be Snow White, this movie that will first premiere in 1937. It's the first feature-length cartoon, and it's an amazing success. In this lecture, we have looked at the life and background of Walt Disney and how they impacted his animation. We have seen how, with the help of others, he overcame business failures and found success with Disney Studios. We have seen how this financial success helped fund the development of animation as both popular culture and art. Walt Disney, and I'm paraphrasing here, said that we knew that cartoons could make people laugh. The question was, could they make people cry? And he answered that question with Snow White, in which many people were moved to tears at the premiere when Snow White died. This success, though, was also based on technology and attentions to character and story. And we have to stress, Disney did not do this alone. He had a lot of help. But he was central because of his ability to find and motivate talent around his artistic vision.